Ready to dive into one of the most incredible and little-known chapters of aviation history? The Soviet Union's flying aircraft carriers, yes, real flying aircraft carriers, were an audacious experiment that pushed the limits of technology and imagination during World War II. Imagine giant bombers carrying fighter planes under their wings, launching them mid-flight to extend their range and strike critical enemy targets. This groundbreaking parasite fighter program, known as Zveno-SPB, changed how air warfare could be fought and left a legacy that still influences modern aerial combat today. From daring surprise raids to jaw-dropping bridge-busting missions, these stories reveal the sheer boldness and innovation behind the Soviet Union's skybound weaponry. If you love uncovering wild facts and amazing history, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss out on mind-blowing stories like this. Let's jump into the 10 mind-blowing facts about the Soviet flying aircraft carriers. Number 1. Yes, they were real. Believe it or not, the Soviet Union actually built flying aircraft carriers during World War II. Giant bombers carrying fighter planes under their wings, like deadly airborne nests. This wasn't some science fiction fantasy or spy movie gimmick. The Tupolev TB-3 bombers, lumbering giants of the sky, carried nimble I-16 fighters piggyback style, extending their range beyond what was ever thought possible. Imagine a massive bomber hauling its own squadron of fighter jets, ready to drop them off mid-air to strike deep behind enemy lines. The idea was bold, daring, and a testament to Soviet ingenuity during desperate times. These flying carriers could deliver fighters loaded with bombs right over critical targets, then have those fighters peel off for attack runs, something no conventional plane could pull off at the time. Against all odds, this airborne mothership strategy turned heads and made history, proving that sometimes the wildest ideas are the ones that change the game. The Soviets weren't just dreaming, they made it real. Number 2. The code name was Zveno-SPB. Behind the scenes of this airborne marvel was a secretive project known as Zveno-SPB, meaning link in Russian. It was no random label, it perfectly captured the essence of the mission, linking bombers and fighters into a deadly, synchronized team in the sky. The Soviet mastermind behind this bold plan, Vladimir Vakrimov, spent years perfecting how to hook fighters like the Ur-16 onto massive TB-3 bombers, creating flying aircraft carriers that could extend fighter range and strike with surprise and precision. The Zveno-SPB wasn't just a concept, it was an operational weapon. These fighter planes, loaded with bombs and strapped to the wings of the TB-3, could launch far beyond their normal limits. The daring pilots released mid-air, swooping down to unleash destruction on key enemy targets like bridges and oil depots. This code name represented the ingenuity and persistence of Soviet aviation in the darkest days of World War II, turning what seemed impossible into a game-changing reality. Zveno-SPB, the flying link that shocked the Axis powers and reshaped the air war forever. Number 3. They couldn't take off alone. Imagine this: fighter planes so weighed down by bombs and fuel that they simply couldn't lift off the ground on their own. That was the reality for the Soviet Ur-16 fighters attached to the TB-3 bombers in the Zveno-SPB project. These stubby, nimble fighters were loaded with nearly a third of their own weight in bombs. Far too heavy for a solo takeoff or a long-range mission. But the genius was in their hitchhiking strategy. By piggybacking on the massive TB-3 bombers, these fighters borrowed fuel and lift, letting the big bird carry them closer to the enemy front. Once airborne and in position, the fighters detached mid-flight, soaring on their own power to carry out precise bombing runs. Without their airborne motherships, these missions would have been impossible. This clever workaround turned the TB-3 into a flying aircraft carrier, extending the reach and punch of Soviet air power when every inch of range counted. The fighters couldn't take off alone, but together they became a fearsome airborne weapon. Number 4. Fuel from the mothership. Tiny fighter planes strapped under the wings of a lumbering giant, drawing life-giving fuel straight from their airborne host. That's exactly how the Soviet Tu-16 fighters stayed airborne during the daring Zveno-SPB missions. Loaded to the brim with bombs, these fighters lacked the fuel capacity for the long trip on their own. But the TB-3 bombers they latched onto had the juice to keep them going. Acting like flying gas stations, these motherships pumped fuel to their parasite fighters, extending their range far beyond what was ever possible solo. This mid-air refueling was a game-changer in an era before modern aerial tankers. It turned clunky, slow bombers and tiny fighters into a perfectly synchronized team, a deadly ballet in the sky. Without the mothership's fuel lifeline, the fighters would have been grounded, but together, they ruled the skies over World War II's toughest battles. Number 5. The first raid was a surprise hit. Imagine the tension on August 10, 1941. A ragtag Soviet squadron soaring across the Black Sea, carrying a secret weapon under their wings. The Zveno-SPB parasite fighters tucked beneath the massive TB-3 bombers, prepared to unleash destruction on the Axis powers. Their target? The King Carol I Bridge, a vital supply artery for Nazi Germany's war machine. The defenders never saw it coming. The first raid took Romanian and German forces completely by surprise, as nimble I-16 fighters dropped bombs with deadly precision from above, smashing critical infrastructure and crippling enemy supply lines. This unexpected strike demonstrated the raw power and ingenuity behind the Soviet flying aircraft carriers. It was a jaw-dropping display of aerial innovation, a surprise hit that shook the Axis defenses and proved that even the most unconventional tactics could change the tide of war. Number 6. Bridge Busters. On August 10, 1941, the Soviet flying aircraft carriers proved their deadly worth in a daring raid that stunned the world. The target? The massive King Carol I Bridge over the Danube River, an essential lifeline for Axis forces, spanning over a mile and towering 70 meters high. Conventional bombers had repeatedly failed to damage this colossal structure. But the parasite fighters, those sleek I-16s hooked under their TB-3 motherships, unleashed a precision strike like no other. Released high above the target, the fighters plummeted in a nearly vertical dive, reaching speeds close to 400 miles per hour, bombs slung beneath their wings. Amid a hailstorm of anti-aircraft fire from every angle, the riverbanks, the bridge's trusses, and even from atop its towering spans, the fighters hit their mark. One direct hit shattered a central span, breaking it like a giraffe's neck, sending steel crashing into the water below. Flames erupted as ruptured oil pipelines ignited, turning the bridge into a blazing ruin. This incredible feat cemented the flying aircraft carrier's legacy as true bridge busters, blending innovation, courage, and destruction in one unforgettable moment. Number 7. Double duty. The Soviet flying aircraft carriers weren't just one-trick ponies. They were masters of multitasking in the skies. After the parasite fighters detached from their TB-3 motherships and dropped their devastating bombs on targets like the King Carol I Bridge, their mission wasn't always over. These nimble I-16 fighters often flipped the script and switched gears in a flash. Instead of heading back to base right away, they turned around and took on the role of interceptors, diving headfirst into combat against incoming German bombers threatening Soviet cities and ports. Imagine the scene. Bombs released with precision, then engines roaring to full throttle as these fighters raced against the clock, cutting through flak and enemy fire to meet the next wave of attackers. This dual-purpose strategy made the flying aircraft carriers more than just delivery systems. They were force multipliers, using surprise, speed, and firepower to protect Soviet skies while wreaking havoc on enemy supply lines. Their ability to seamlessly transition from bombers to defenders showcased Soviet innovation and combat tenacity at its finest. Number 8. Stalin shut it down. Despite the bold success of the Zveno-SPB parasite fighter program, it wasn't failure that ended this daring innovation. It was a harsh dose of wartime reality. The TB-3 bombers, the massive motherships carrying those stubby I-16 fighters, were already relics by 1941. Stalin himself made the call to shut down further expansion of the program. Not because the missions failed, but because these rare TB-3s were urgently needed elsewhere. The aging bombers were redirected for transport duties vital to the war effort, especially with newer, more capable aircraft entering service. The program's cancellation was a strategic decision: maintain supply lines and logistical support rather than continue experimental air raids. Though short-lived, the Zveno-SPB left an indelible mark on military aviation history. It showed how innovation and necessity can combine in wartime to produce some of the most audacious tactics ever flown, before political and practical pressures clipped its wings. Number 9. A decade in the making. The daring concept of flying aircraft carriers was no spur-of-the-moment idea. It was the result of over 10 years of tireless experimentation and innovation by designer Vladimir Vakhmistrov. Starting in the early 1930s, Vakhmistrov became obsessed with the idea of parasite fighters, small, nimble planes that could hitch a ride on larger bombers, extending their range and firepower beyond what was previously possible. He tirelessly tested various ways to attach these fighters, perfecting the engineering needed to launch and recover them mid-air. His vision was groundbreaking: to create a strategic advantage by combining the long-range endurance of heavy bombers with the agility and precision of fighters. Despite technical hurdles and skepticism from many, Vakhmistrov pushed forward, believing this hybrid air power could change the face of warfare. By the time World War II erupted, his decade-long work culminated in the Zveno-SPB program, leading to real missions where parasite fighters struck targets deep behind enemy lines. Though the program was eventually shelved, Vakhmistrov's relentless pursuit laid the foundation for modern concepts of force multiplication and aerial innovation that still inspire military aviation today. Number 10. A legacy that lives on. Though the Soviet flying aircraft carriers of the Zveno-SPB program were short-lived, their pioneering spirit echoes loudly in modern military aviation. Today, the daring goal of extending fighter aircraft range without the need to land is achieved through aerial refueling, a high-stakes dance in the skies where tanker planes transfer fuel mid-flight to fighters and bombers, dramatically increasing their mission endurance. This modern practice carries forward the exact strategic vision that Vladimir Vakhmistrov chased decades ago with his parasite fighters, overcoming the limits of fuel capacity to strike farther, stay longer, and respond faster. While the technology has evolved from physically carrying fighters under bomber wings to flexible, precise fuel transfers, the core idea remains the same: push the boundaries of what's possible in air combat. The Zveno-SPB's bold experiments paved the way for today's air forces to project power globally, reminding us how innovation born from necessity during war can shape the future of warfare and aviation forever. And there you have it, the incredible saga of the Soviet flying aircraft carriers, a bold and brilliant chapter in aviation history that few know about, but everyone should. From daring raids to game-changing innovations, these flying motherships proved how creativity and courage can push the limits of what's possible in war and technology. If you enjoyed this deep dive into a hidden World War II marvel, don't forget to hit that like button, Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more fascinating facts and stories that keep you hooked. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.